Welcome, everyone, to what is going to be a banger of an Uncle Bobbie's virtual author event tonight. I'm Avisa with Uncle Bobbie's. We are located in Germantown, Philadelphia. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are here tonight to celebrate the paperback release of Amanda Seales' collection of essays, Small Doses, Potent Truths for Everyday Use. It was released last year, it was released in October 2019, but the paperback edition is out now. You know where you can buy it if you click the link at the bottom of the screen, the green link that says Buy Small Doses. It will take you to Uncle Bobbie's online bookshop. Or should you find yourself in Germantown anytime soon, feel free to come into the shop and buy it. So if you have experienced our author events before, you know that we always have an audience Q&A right after the discussion. So please feel free to submit your questions using the Ask a Question module at the bottom of the screen. You can submit them over the course of the conversation. You can vote for which questions you want answered first. And we encourage audience participation. So with that, let me introduce our moderator. She's a contributing writer for The Atlantic, the host of the Spotify podcast, Jemele Hill is Unbothered. Please join me in welcoming Jemele Hill. Where's she at? Hi, Jemele.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm excited.
Yeah, same.
Okay, now for the lady of the hour. She is a comedian and creative visionary. She's the creator and the host of the music/comedy game show Smart, Black, and Funny. You might know her from HBO's Insecure or her wildly popular Instagram. And she also has a weekly podcast entitled Small Doses. She is one of the realest truth tellers of our time. So please give it up for Miss Amanda Seales.
Am I here? Can you see me? Hey!
Welcome, Amanda. Thank you for being here.
Black, Avisa. It's Smart, Funny, and Black.
Smart, Funny, and Black? Oh, goodness gracious.
It's very easy to mix.
You're all three.
I understand. I understand. Thank y'all so much for having me. Thank you. Jemele is busy. She is very, just well sought after. So I am so honored for you finding time in your day to be able to talk to me about this book that damn near killed me.
I can't wait to get into that. Thank you for asking me because I love your energy, your spirit, love talking to you, and certainly love watching you perform both your comedy. I've been a part of Smart, Funny, and Black. I'm not sure if I was only Black. I don't know if I was smart or funny.
That is false. You know that's not true.
But it's a lot of pressure. I was like, I felt like my entire Blackness was at stake doing Smart.
You know what? And I try so hard to just be like, it's just fun. It's a good time. Like, just relax. And people are like, no. I feel like I'm losing a Black card with every question I get incorrect.
Don't act like you don't know that Black people take games way too seriously. And so,
I'll tell you. And our audience really does. Yandy. So, Yandy from Love and Hip Hop, and also who's her own entrepreneur and just a great person in general. Her question one time for the final Blackstination, which was our final segment. The question was like, name three, it's a new Black colony and we need to get our economy on point. And so name three Black financial, people who are finance greats in Blackness, business owners or whatever that can help us get our money on point. And they can be dead or alive. And so the other person had said Madam C.J. Walker. And then they named some other person that nobody had heard of, but they really hipped us to it. And I think the other person they named was Master P. And they were because, he's an innovator, he was an entrepreneur, a visionary. And so Yandy, she named two genuinely good people. And then she was like, and Jesus. Yo.
But technically,
But technically the audience was like, he was broke. The audience was like,
oh, so y'all just gonna forget he turned water into wine? Like that wasn't enough? That's prospering.
She tried it. And the audience was like, Jesus was a carpenter. He was many things, but he did not have financial knowledge. Like, stop it.
Wait a minute. Did they really call Jesus a broke boy?
They legit were like, that wasn't his specialty. Like that was, and she was like, yo, I just thought Jesus was always the right answer for everything. And she learned that day that like, because there was something else that she had answered and she had said Beyonce and the audience was like, incorrect. She was like, I just thought like Beyonce and Jesus are foolproof answers. And I learned today, because we did like an exit interview. And she was like, I learned today that they are not. They are not.
Right. So I can take that out the utility belt. Like, don't answer Jesus or Beyonce, because as much as you think they might fit, perhaps they do not fit all of it. I want to go back to something you said a moment ago. Now, I am in the process of completing my memoir. So what people have to realize, if you haven't written a book, it's like a friend of mine used to say, I like having written. I don't like writing, right? That means when it's done. And so this process, when you said it, even though it almost killed me, I felt that in all of my spirit. But for that, can you please just sort of expound, like, what was this process for you, like writing this book?
This process really tested my discipline. And I just thought that I was this very disciplined scholar and artist, you know, and I've always been very good about deadlines. You know, I love a deadline. And ma'am, I was just a radical, if we're going to be kind. But my editor is Samantha Weiner. I got to tell you, she is one of the most patient people ever. And she would be like, so how are we looking? And I'm like, well, I haven't written anything for the past 2 weeks. And at a certain point, it just became like, I'm not even going to try and lie anymore. Like, I'm not even going to pretend that this is easy. I thought that once I wrote my table of contents, I would write this book in a month. I don't know who I think I am, but I think
I was like, wow, that's ambitious.
This is why, though. This is why, because, and this is what I always fuck up with. It's that I'd be thinking, oh, I can see it clearly in my mind, so it's going to just flow out on the page. And we are always hosting. And so, like, you know, the thought is in your mind and you say it and it's done. The problem, the doozy with writing is that you write it, it's not done. It's just the beginning. Because now you got to edit it and edit it and edit it and edit it and then turn it in and edit it again and then edit it again. And so that was the part that kind of started to really like just fuck with me, because the fine tuning was really what was fucking with me. Like the story. So in the book, there's a bunch of different types of content. Like there's stories, there's essays, there's blurbs, there's lists. The stories were my favorite thing to write because they just felt so natural in terms of writing them. Like they just flowed. Like it was more of an entertaining process for me to even like remember these things and to come up with colorful language, etc. The essays felt like I was back in school. And like, I liked school when I was in school, but I'm not. And so that was kind of like that. And I'd reached a point career wise where like so much of the work I do is just like, it kind of flows out and you do it and it's done and it's in the world. And so it really started to test my, my resolve and also like make me question myself. Like, are you as efficient as you think you are? Like, and then I had to, but you know what I will say? It forced me to be more creative with the book, because I wasn't going to have poems in there and I wasn't going to have like, I just had to get a little bit more abstract, because it was like, you just can't, if you write another essay, you'll kill yourself. And I don't mean like commit suicide, but like, it just felt like writing the essay would exhaust me to a point of like sub-Saharan thirst. So I would have to devise other ways to like stay interested. And so then I was like, okay, you know what? Let's just do some poems. And so you'll see in there why, like my Black Girl Magic poem from the BET Social Awards is in there. And then, you know, also like for all of us who are creatives, like when you sit down to write the book, it's not the first time you were creating. So I think that was the other thing too, like being able to allow myself to like go into the stores of stuff I've written before and be like, well, this applies. Use this essay that you wrote for the Hollywood Reporter. Here we go. This applies.
You made it easier on yourself. Actually, it's funny because the two best bits of advice I received about writing a book were from Walter Mosley, which makes sense because he's a prolific, amazing writer, and Rick Ross, who was working on his memoir as well. You know, Walter Mosley told me something, and I hadn't thought about writing this way. I don't know about you, Amanda, but I was used to writing very emotionally, meaning when I was in the mood, I would write. And so being a career journalist, we still live on deadline, right? So, you know, whenever the deadline is, it's like, okay, if I don't feel like writing till 6 hours before it's due, then I'll just do it and bang it on out. And that's it, right? But Walter Mosley was like, no, writing is a discipline. And so when you said the word discipline, that really like struck me because that means he writes for 2 hours, at least 2 hours every day. And when I adopted that is when I started to make progress. And yes. And Rick Ross gave me some good advice in terms of how to really organize my book. And so that was, he broke down his life into 16 incidents. And I was like, that is a really smart thing to do. I was like, I'm going to try that. So when it came to organizing, because that was the thing, because you're writing essays and blurbs, and you're dropping bits about a number of different topics. And while you segmented them all, what made you choose the topics that you did, from, you know, Black women to colorism to tokenism to what happens in the workplace? Like, how did you narrow this down?
So I combined the two. Like, some of it was very regimental and then some of it was emotional. So like it's, I'll explain. Well, first of all, let me just say this. I didn't really make headway until I started creating more time in my day. And people who've heard me talk about this book have heard me say this. I had to start getting up at 5 a.m. because I had to start creating time to write that wasn't being shared by other time. So like, I would like call myself trying to write at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's like, you got a whole other life happening at this point. And so I'm trying to field calls and texts and shit. And it's like, you can't, like, you got to be focused. And so I would get up at 5 a.m. and write till 7 while the world was still asleep. And that's when I started to make headway. And also when I started to like set aside specific stretches of time. I went to my aunt's house in Arizona for 10 days just to write. I had nothing else that I had to do at that time. And that was a luxury. Sorry if you hear my dog. Jordy is very persistent. And he's like, I even closed the curtain. He's like, I hear you though. I can't see you, but I hear you. In terms of the topics, there were things that I knew people wanted to hear from me about, right? So that was kind of like the setup of the specific chapters, like glowing up, career, womanhood, racism, and people are weird. And I based that basically on kind of like people's response. Hold on, because this nigga.
I love this. I love this. You know what? That is a real Black animal parent. She was like, you know how sometimes your mama would check you and you acting up in another room. Amanda just was like, let me go.
Because it's just, I know, and here we are. He just wanted to get in. He has no reason to be in here. All right. Someone's like, let him out. He was out. He trying to get in. He has a whole yard. And like, he's literally right here with a toy. You see him with this damn toy, this toy. And my mom bought this toy. All it is, she was like, this is the ugliest stuffed animal I've ever seen. And so I had to buy it. And I'm like, all right. So that was kind of like the bottom line in terms of, I based doing those chapters on the responses I was getting from folks about the podcast. Like, I do Small Doses podcast, and that was the impetus for the book. And those were kind of like the pockets that people were most responsive to. And And then within that is where I came up with the different spaces. And that was more about like emotionally what spoke to me. Like tokenism just pisses me off. So I knew I needed to address it, you know, like just being a Black woman and going to get my makeup done at work and not having anyone, like I've had literal makeup artists say to me, you should have brought your own makeup. You should have brought your own hair products. Like, I think that used to that's happened to me several times. Like, yeah, oh, what? Girl, I've had makeup artists say to me, when I said, you know, I'd like my makeup done natural, they were like, oh, so you don't want makeup. They just.
Oh, man.
So like that felt like something I needed to talk about. But then also it was like, I wrote from an experiential place. So, you know, that's kind of where the book is less, you know, it's nonfiction in that it's memoir-ish, because so much of it is coming from just like what speaks to me, you know, and I genuinely want to speak from a place of expertise as someone who's experienced it versus expertise as someone who's researched it. And I think that's what needs to be understood about this book. Like, I'm not speaking as an expert, you know, ologist of any, I'm an Amanda-ologist. So this is just, and because so many comedians, the normal rite of passage is to write a book of essays. That's like the typical kind of like, this is what you do as a comic for your first book. So it was like, how do I do that, but do it in my own way? And that's why you see like just, there's topics that I wanted to address, but it ain't enough for me to write a whole damn essay about, you know, like, am I going to write a whole essay about ghosting? No, but like, it needs to be addressed. So that was that.
So what does it mean?
Green in the chat who keeps like putting up little quotes. And I'm like, I did say that just 5 seconds ago.
So what does it mean for you that this book is now in paperback?
That people liked it. You know, when I say that this book almost killed me, it was one of those things where when I was done, I was done. Like when I was done with this book, it was like, what's next? Like, and so it's kind of bugged out to me that it's still living enough for them to feel comfortable enough to publish a paperback. Because for those who don't know, like, you know, they don't always do that. Like sometimes they're kind of like, all right, we did it. It did its time. But a paperback is kind of the publisher saying, well, we see that this book still has legs and that there's another audience that we can reach by printing it in a kind of like another price point. And so that was cool. Like this whole book publishing thing is a different world. It's a different beast, you know, and it's like, it's a learning curve. So that was cool to find that out. And then also it just also let me know that I wrote something that mattered to people. And that's, that means a lot because, you know, you can, I've come up with shit that people are like, I don't care about this. And you're like, cool.
Like, cool story, sis.
Cool. Like, I have made sketches that I thought were amazing. And then I put them on YouTube and people are like, try again.
So I don't know the last time you thumbed through Small Doses, but what you also should be proud of is the fact that so much of what you talked about held up so very well. Yeah, it is. You know, how does that make you feel knowing that you wrote a lot of things that are frankly timeless?
Okay, journalist question. She's like, touche. Thank you. How does that make me feel knowing that I wrote things that are timeless? I didn't know that I wrote things that are timeless. So even you saying that is making me feel a little verklempt. I'm sorry that there's a dog here. Dog parents understand this. Like you just reach a point where you don't even realize there's a dog on your lap. Like you're just like, I'm
Because look, I'm thinking about what you wrote about diversity, still true. What you wrote about white women, still true.
It's
what
like,
you wrote about, like all of it is like it held up. It held up so well.
It makes me feel affirmed in the fact that I do not write. Like, I don't write from a place of shock. I think there's people who really write for, like, that's what clout chasing essentially is, right? Like, you're just writing to see what the rise is that you're going to get out of people. And I'm not a journalist, but I try my best to write from an objective space of like looking at vantage points and constructing my point of view from like a genuine concern for like all the vantage points. And I think that's how it ends up being timeless, because it's not just the mood I'm in, it's considering like the whole bigger picture. But it also scares me that we have not advanced as much as I would like to. I mean, it's only been a short amount of time relatively, but I've always been simultaneously ahead of my time and a late bloomer.
Mm.
You know, it's like I think the late bloomer part comes in me not realizing that like it's like I don't necessarily realize what I'm doing. Also that I didn't get titties until freshman year of college.
I relate.
I was like, when is this happening? When? But I take it very seriously that I have a platform and that the stuff I'm saying matters to people. And so, you know, my comedy special isn't called I Be Knowing because it's a cool catchphrase. It's because like I really do feel like I have a gift of sight. And I hope that in my legacy, what you're saying does become a part of the comprehensive view of how I work, in sense of like, hey, listen to her. Because as many Black women, she be knowing. And like, we kind of have, you know, foresight and insight that often is not regarded as it should be in terms of steering us from the bullshit before we're drowning in it. But I wrote okay, let me just say something real quick. So my man was supposed to walk the damn dog before he left, okay? He was supposed to walk the dog before he left so we could avoid all of this. And he did not get a chance to walk the dog before he left, as happens. But now we are having to deal with the non-walking of the dog right now because he's like, where is my attention? Like, ma'am, where is it? Where is it? So I just want to apologize for the unprofessionalism of this, but you are also getting a glimpse into the realism of COVID life, because this is it.
But I think people actually, this is part of what, a big part of what people appreciate about you, Amanda, is that like you're very transparent and you're real. So I think people enjoy seeing these wonderful interruptions by Jordy. They do. Everybody's talking about it in the chat. They're like, Jordy.
Jordy just left the room, and I can promise you he's on a hunt for cat poop. And I can't get up and stop him. But Jordy loves cat poop. He be eating it like chicken nuggets. Like Lando doesn't realize that like Jordy just wants to sniff his booty. That's it. Like that's all he wants to do. And Lando's like, bruh. And Jordy's like, can I please just sniff your booty? Please. Like that's where I'm at. I Googled it and it's normal. Apparently it's not abnormal, but like Jordy be about the cat poop. And so,
you know, we all have our crosses to bear. It's kind of what it is. So as I said, you wrote a lot of timeless things, and the timeless things about race, they're great. But I found that some of the other things that you wrote were, you know, especially woven into my spirit. Some of y'all out here getting periods you don't deserve might have been one of my favorites. And while I'm a married woman now, but I was like, yeah, that was a life.
There was a time. Is that the person I am now with was very much a part of my era of getting periods I did not deserve. And, you know, when we were in college, there were many a times where I was like coming in the door like, doof, I got it. And he's like, yes, we're still in the
when it was an event where he's like, you telling your friends like,
we are still in the game, you know, like, man, listen. listen, I feel like people just are so self-righteous about that. Like, quit acting like you use the condom every time. You would lie. Like Jesus is not impressed you with that lie. But I really aspire to empower people to like find their power in the truth in themselves. And I just think that so much of what is being preached out here is to lie to yourself about, things about you and about things you have done. And that doesn't empower anybody. Like so people just be fronting. And it's like, everybody has some darkness in them. I don't give a fuck how much of a follower of Jesus you are. Everybody has a mean thought ever so often, has a stank thought ever so often. And you may very quickly center yourself and course correct. Okay. But I really hate this like self-righteous shit that people be on, where they like hold themselves to this standard of perfection. It's just simply not realistic. And especially if you're funny, you're going to have some shit that you got in your, come on, listen, I'm in a group chat with Jemele. Like sometimes there's this shit that just got to get said. And you're like, I couldn't leave it on the table. Like, I just couldn't leave it on the table. It was too funny to not say. But I just think that it's the embracing of our whole selves that we're able to find power in. So like when I say things like that in the book, it's meant to release you from this like judgment of yourself that is not helpful in any shape, way, or form. And if you can identify things that may have been mistakes or errors, you also are then empowered to change them.
Well, that kind of reminds me of something you talked about recently on your podcast, Small Doses, when you talked about how people baby themselves. And it made me curious, what are some of the things you feel like you're still babying yourself about?
Well, to be honest, not a lot. COVID made me really have to like face the mirror and be like, ma'am, cut the shit.
Okay. What did you have to face?
My codependency. And the myriad of ways it shows up that I had not understood. And I didn't even really know that I was a codependent. And I think part of that is that in my fierce independence, I didn't know that that was something that could still exist. And it is. You can be 100% a very independent woman and still have codependencies that come from your daddy issues, which at this point, my daddy issues are father issues. I mean, they were fine. And you also just have to be honest with the things that you have let yourself off the hook for, that you call your personality, when really they're not your personality. They are protections that you've come up with, oftentimes that are related to negative scenarios that have basically like metastasized into negative traits of your own. So like, for example, like I've just always been almost Lena Dunham. I hate to quote Lena Dunham, but she calls it aggressive self-acceptance, where you're just like, this is me and I'm okay with it. So you need to be okay with it. And it's like, that is a result of being bullied. That's a result of being misunderstood. Like that's a result of people like invalidating you. And so like you develop this like armor of, I gotta like defend myself before you come for me type shit. And it ends up repelling more than it ends up embracing. And so that's something I was doing for a long time. And I felt completely like justified in that. And I feel like it would push people away that weren't necessarily coming for me in that way. And that doesn't mean that there aren't people that still come for me, but it means that I'm able to now be a lot more conscious of that being their problem and not mine, and it not triggering me to be a version of myself that I'm not proud of. So I had to I guess to answer your question in a very succinct way, I had to identify the parts of myself that I'm not proud of and be real with myself about how much of it is my accountability to change.
That's one to chew on. Very hard to do sometimes, those self-assessments. There was something, I mean, there are a lot of things you wrote in this book that I love, but I want to focus in on two particular things. One, you wrote, you addressed this to Black men in particular. We are not your enemy when we challenge you to be your own champion. And you also wrote, we are not your enemy when we aspire to be our own champions. Why did you think both of those messages needed to be said?
I mean, I get so much hate from brothers and I've gotten hate from brothers for both of those things. For one, saying like, hey, this is something that needs to be fixed, like that needs to be addressed. And coming from a place of like, as a Black woman who wants you to win, like, and who wants us to win, like, we got to address this. And then also, like, when we as Black women defend ourselves or ask for what we want, I feel like there's so often where Black men see that as an affront to them getting what they deserve. Like somehow it takes away from some like finite storage of support for Black women to say we deserve support and championing. And that's just not the case. And again, like, there's also the way messages are delivered and, you know, the tone and the context and the placement. And I've had to get better at just kind of reading the room on that. But when it boils down to it, those two messages I felt like needed to be said in their own spaces, because there's just a lot of misinterpreting of each other that goes on between Black men and Black women and how we support each other. And I just wanted to be like bottom line about it. It's still going to get misinterpreted, but I've never seen value in having people around me that don't challenge me to be a better me. So I don't know when, like, the Black men that are in my life, like, that's how we interact with each other. So I just feel like on a whole, and I really genuinely feel like Black people, particularly Black Americans, we have a different existence than we're living. And we need to understand that because of that, we have to operate in a unique fashion than other people. I mean, we are a tribe of our own. And there's a code that, sir, there's just a code I wish we could operate on that says like, thank you versus fuck you.
I don't say this next statement because I don't want people to get the impression that I'm coming for Black men or that I'm singling them out. But I also noticed that you do get a certain kind of energy from some of them, because it's not all of them, from some of them. And I'm wondering, because I've been on the receiving end of that energy as well. But as a Black woman, how does it make you feel when that does happen? Because I'll be 100% honest, in my case, it's hurtful. It really is hurtful.
Girl, like, I never get used to it. It really fucks with me, because I'm just like, how are you not seeing the love over here? Like, I'm like, you know, and that's when you got to really implement your 4 agreements and be like, nothing is personal. Nothing is personal. I'm doing my best. Like, because it is really like, because to me, Black people is personal, right? So when I can take white bullshit all day long, literally, I can take white bullshit all day long. I'm like, well, this is expected of you. But when Black people and Black men in particular come to me, I think the other thing, let me just be also clear. The energy is rarely coming from a place of like, Amanda, I feel like you're hurting me. Because of the nature of how we have, not we, but the nature of toxic masculinity, it's usually presented to us in such a attacking and forceful fashion that the conversation doesn't become about like, hey, Amanda, like, I wish you would kind of deal with us in this better way. It becomes fuck you, bitch. And it becomes like I'm trying to kill you. And that's essentially what happened with Gail and Snoop. And that's what the conversation ended up being about, right? It's like, you were offended, fair, but the response is not to then try to take someone lower than you feel like they took you. Like, that doesn't get us anywhere. But that is oftentimes the method. And as a community, our conflict resolution is not like top of mind. And I've had to learn that in my own life, like I used to feel like, well, if I'm telling the truth, then there shouldn't be an issue. And it's like, yeah, but that hurt someone's feelings. and like, it was true and it was valid, but maybe not the best time. And maybe, and also like, if you're weaponizing the truth, that doesn't make it okay either. And I was very guilty of doing that, right? Like, just firing back with a truth that I know is going to, what do they say? The truth hurts. Like, I know it's going to punch somebody in the face. But to get back to your point, I mean, yeah, like it hurts my feelings. I've had to do a lot of work internally to be able to manage it better because it's not going to stop. And it's not just, and the reality is it's not just like you said, it's not just to me. You've dealt with it. Martin Luther King dealt with it. Like, as much as we deify Martin Luther King, like when he passed away, when he was murdered, he was at the height of anxiety and he was really frustrated with, the fact that like people really just kind of were demonizing him for helping. And ultimately it was about ego, not on his end, but on other people's end, and feeling like, well, who are you to come in here and try to help, which is just kind of beyond my scope of comprehension. But I've been trying to be better about acknowledging those that are showing the love versus, kind of like getting caught up in those that don't.
Yeah. And, I think it's okay to admit that too, that like, yeah, the shit does hurt. I mean, I've said it before, like when your own people who how you feel about and who you ride for, a lot of times in ways that they could never imagine. And then they try to, come at you a certain way. You're like, whoa, you really don't understand that shit stings. Like, it stings on a different level. I just want to tell everybody, we do have a question feature in here. So please start formulating and firing your questions because I'm going to be taking some live Q&As in a minute. I know we just have a couple more minutes between our conversation and then we get to hear from the people. Something else that was in small doses that I think is very relevant today. You wrote, as a Black actress in Hollywood, or a Blackstress, as you call yourself, race is so attached. Race is so attached to us that we never get a break from it. With everything that has happened during the pandemic, how much more, or not how much more, but like, how do you think the events of what have happened recently in this country will make that even more true than it already is? And is that a good thing? I mean, Daniel Kaluuya, for example, he has some interesting answers to this because he has said before that like, that's all people want to talk about with him when they're asking him about his work. I don't know if that was necessarily what you were talking about because you were just talking about just living and existing. But that being said, I'm wondering how you deal with that and whether or not you think recent events are going to make that worse, if you will.
I mean, I think I'm a unique case just because like so much of my life has been centered in the study and the challenging of racism. Like, I mean, my scholarship, my academic work is in African-American studies. Like my undergrad and my graduate degree are both in African-American studies. And so it's like that it's more than just an experiential thing. Like there's a an expertise there that still drives my passion for addressing it, you know, in real actualized ways. And I think for all intents and purposes, like, actors come at things differently, you know, like they're playing different roles. Like I am an actress, I'm able to act, but I'm really a comedian who acts. Like, I am not the personality of an actor. Because I don't, like, I like embodying myself more than anything else. Like, and I feel like actors love getting to play in different bodies and different roles and characters. And I'm just like, I got some shit to say as Amanda. So, and I had to come to that realization. But I think the events of this year, or this time, because it's more than just a year at this point, the events of this era will force, more than Black folks, I think it forces other folks to have to live in the awareness of racism in a way that they just had the very luxury of not doing so. And I think for us, it kind of gave us more flexibility on how we live in the space of race. Because for so much of this, it's really been about like trying to convince people that Black folk are put asunder, right? Like, I mean, and so that's where you get slave films, and that's where you get like all of these movies that are just like, look at us overcoming. You see, we had to overcome some shit. Whereas now I think there's definitely a movement in saying like, we deserve to not just live in the space of race as it is juxtaposed to Black to whiteness. We want to also live in the space of our culture and ethnicity and race in whatever form we want. And I know for me, like, that's what's driving me at this point, is being able to create work that is not simply just about us overcoming. Like, I don't want to just overcome white bullshit. Like, you know, shit, we trying to overcome fuck boys. Like, you know, we trying to overcome loss of edges. We're trying to overcome.
We're trying to have a agenda out here.
Yeah, we're trying to have a agenda. Like, we're trying to overcome, how did R&B become like what it is now? Like, we're niggas is singing entire songs in a 2-note range. Like, we've got a lot to deal with. So I just, I think for me, that's where my optimist like hat goes on, which is like, this time can be a space of liberation, because it also is a time where the gatekeepers are a lot more prone to having to be pushed to say like, no, let us do this. No, we're going to do this. It just sucks that we still have to be in a let us do this type of way, you know? Like, I hope before I leave this earth that I see spaces of Black creation that are being controlled by people who believe in Black creation being done by Black creatives as like an essential. And that there's many ways to do it. You know, like Tyler Perry has his way of doing it. It's not my method, but he has his way of doing it. But also understanding the value in, you know, the way Prentice, our showrunner on Insecure, does things, which is like very high level. It's very quality control. It's very, if we have 15 hours to shoot, we're going to use all 15 hours. You know, it's like, then you have Melina, who is very much like about vision and picture, and, you know, every strand needs to be in the right place. Like, so, you know, there's such a spectrum, and it doesn't have to just be about like, how do we do this economically and efficient wise just to get it out?
All right, before I get to the first question from the audience, last question from me. Would you write another book?
I would love to write a book of short stories, of like basically romantic comedy short stories. That's what's in my heart. And it's really just, I haven't had time to write it. But there's, would I write another nonfiction book? You know, in the beginning of the pandemic, I was very much ready to write a book of essays about like, you know, kind of just like political, like socio-political, like commentary and musings, you know, like a la Amanda. And then I just kind of reached a point, Jemele, where I was like, there's so many other people to write about that right now. Like, you know, and then you had Charles Blow come out with his book, and then Tamika Mallory come out with her book. You know, you're just like, there's just other voices in that space that can inhabit that space. And I want to inhabit a joy space. That I just feel like I also realized like I've been writing so much and creating so much from that space long before this last year of eruption of awakenings, that in order for me to write a book again, it needs to be what I learned from the last book, which is that I really like writing stories. So it's like, write more stories. But I have a book of short stories in my head.
They say you can call it bedtime tea.
I could listen, and you know what? I've just had a life of niggas. You know what I'm saying? Like I've had a life of niggas, and I've lived this life just for y'all. Like essentially, that's what this life has been for. It's for y'all. So it's like, why hoard this? Why hoard it? Like I dated a whole like weed distro that lived in my apartment building. I can't keep that to myself. I got to share that with y'all.
Listen, Amanda, we deserve.
I mean, he was from Detroit. I dated 2 Detroit niggas that just deserve novels.
You know, I'm here for that.
I know.
I'm here for that.
Listen, my man I'm with right now, we're a 3-part, like we are a 3-part saga, you know? And so, and when I talk about Black love, let me also just say that I'm not even just talking about romantic love. Like I want to talk about like Black love within like womanhood and friendships. And, you know, I don't necessarily write stories about like lesbian and gay relationships because that's not been my experience. And so I really try to stick to like my experience and what I know. But there's just so many versions of Black joy that I want to write about. And foolery that I have experienced. Like I went on a trip with my ex's fiance to Haiti with her best friend who turned out to be a full-on female narcissist. Y'all, I gotta write that story. Like that is girl trip. Listen, y'all thought girl trip was a hit. I gotta write that story.
You have to write that.
She's on a boat. Only one person speaks Creole, but she also can't swim. I mean, it's just a lot. She tried to fight me 3 times on the trip. Like, listen, I got tales. And if I'm being honest, I only very, very recently got back to myself. I have spent 2 years depressed and somebody that I wasn't. And I didn't even realize that shit until I went through a very traumatic experience at the end of 2020 that when I got to the other side of, I was like, oh my God, I have not been myself in 2 years. And in coming back to myself, it's made me feel like I can just do things that I had like talked myself out of doing, which was writing and creating for TV and film. And, you know, writing short stories, like, bitch, you can do whatever you want. Just do it. But I had created like these like barriers of possibility and capability. And if I'm being honest, it was not for any other reason than just like imposter syndrome and fear that, you know, kind of gets sprinkled into your space from just the nature of being in a competitive field. But y'all about to see some shit because I'm past that. So now I'm ready to rumble.
Well, that actually is a perfect segue into one of our first questions, because I'm going to prioritize the ones people have voted on and said, hey, they really like you to answer this. This is from Karen Sanchez, who says, Amanda, you mentioned you were in a depression, which you just alluded to, for 2 years recently on your IG stories. A few months back, you also shared you've been in a really dark place. What can you share about getting out these feelings as a person who is both incredibly smart, realistic, and funny?
You know what? The first thing was me, and people say this, and I've lived it. The first thing was me admitting, like, "Oh, you in a depression, girl?" Like, because I think I was. Hold on a second. I think I was kind of calling it a funk, which was not giving it its just due. You know, like it was just like, oh, you're like in a funk, like it'll pass. You're in a phase. And, you know, a funk requires a nap. Like, it was like, these naps are not working. So it's like being able to admit to yourself, like, oh, like I'm in a low. And then I listened to this podcast by this dope sis. She's not Black, but she has sisterliness in her. Jessica Lanyeto. It's called Ghost of a Podcast. And she's an astrologist and a medium, and she's just a common sense woman. And she was like, don't abandon yourself. And I was just listening to this podcast that my friend had sent me, and I was lying on the couch in the process of abandoning myself. And she was like, do not abandon yourself. Like, wherever you're at right now and you feel without, you have it in you to provide for yourself. And at that moment, it was kind of like just something I needed to hear that I've carried with me since then. Because I know when I'm abandoning myself. I know when I am letting the anxiety rule me. And so many of the failed romantic relationships I have been in were with men who were always the victim in their own life. They were always their life was happening to them. And I had to realize that, like, oh, I'm doing that now. I'm letting my life happen to me. And I have the tools and capabilities to not let that happen. And, you know, I've had people say, like, oh, you know, you can't intellectualize these things. And I don't agree with that. Sometimes you do have to go to your logic space and be like, logically, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to get a therapist. Okay. And then I'm going to need to do boxing. I may need to go to Reiki. Like, sometimes you just got to get out of your energy space and just kind of like go into like a different space, because all those feelings are like ruling things, and they take over, and you kind of got to like be real Virgo about it. So that's what I did. And I think the other thing too was, and we talked about this earlier, was I just had to decide, like, if I'm going to be on this earth, like, am I going to enjoy it? Because if not, I might as well just kill it. I might as well just call it a day. And at a certain point, I was letting all of the negative determine how I enjoy this life. And that's when I was like, I should just kill myself. Because if it's going to be like this, I just don't want to be here. And like, if I can't change it, then clearly I'm just going to be in this space, and this is not fun. So what's the point? And it took, you know, my therapist, because that's when I remember when I said depression takes you to a place of irrationality, like that's irrational talking, right? And then your therapist is like, bitch, like, like, that's why Black women need to go to Black women therapists. Because my Black woman therapist was like, okay, so let's walk it back. Let's walk it back, Mary, with the black lipstick and the scarf. Let's walk it back. Like, first of all, fuck these hoes. Like, I mean, for all intents and purposes, my therapist was like, fuck these hoes. Like, don't you ever let these bitch ass niggas try and make you hate living. Like, she said that in the most therapy of ways, but that's how I heard it. Like, don't you ever let these people who hate themselves make you hate your life. Ever. Like, and, you know, I'm saying a lot of things because it's a lot of things, but it all ends up boiling down to, for me, like, if I'm going to be here, I have to take control of how I enjoy my time here. And Black women oftentimes are not given the space to do that. We are absolutely expected to make everybody else's time enjoyable.
It was the Mary with the black lipstick for me.
Because you know what that is.
I know what that is. I know what it is.
Like, I was your lover and your secretary. Nigga. You know, I'm just not trying to light nobody's car on fire and then catch a case, you know? Never forget that when Left Eye lit that house on fire and she was asked, do you feel any remorse? And she was like, what? No, that devil house needed to burn. And, you know, like I want to feel that resolute in my decision-making about myself.
Less heavy question. This is from Ashley Hall. How can we get signed copies of your book?
So I'm actually providing signed copies to Uncle Bobbie's. So you can purchase signed copies from Uncle Bobbie's. That was an easy question. Look at that.
Yeah, see, another one. Will Smart, Funny, and Black be back on the road or in the crib soon? I've been to both. This is from Mark LaHall.
So Smart, Funny, and Black has a date in Boston in October. And I'd be looking at that shit like, damn, we about to be back in the world. Like, and we are doing a free show on May 22nd, a free virtual show, May 22nd. So we're in the process right now of locking in our guests. My goal is for Smart, Funny, and Black to become for Smart, Funny, and Black in the Crib, which is our virtual show, for it to become a free show that has support from sponsors. Because all of my work, I want to be able to be accessible by the community, which is why like Small Doses at this point, my podcast is still free, right? And it's not behind a paywall. And Smart, Funny, and Black, when we do the live show, like I make a point of making sure that there is a large amount of $35 tickets. And I will always have majority tickets be $35. And I demand that we have $35 tickets that are still in the front row, you know, because I don't feel like your access to seeing the show at the best place in the show should be based on your class. Like I should be based on your timeliness. Like if you really want to see this shit, then you buy the ticket early and you get your $35 ticket in the front row. You know, the seat next to you might be $100, but that's because that person, you know, didn't get on it fast enough.
I have seen what you've had to say about this, but nevertheless, not everybody. This is from Ingrid Green, who's done a wonderful job of quoting you in the chat. Ingrid asks, Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, of course, said the U.S. is not racist. Your thoughts?
You know, listen, there's people who are like, you know, she's a politician, so she can't say that. But ultimately, you can disagree with something without having to agree with it, right? So like, I think that for the amount of word gymnastics that she is a Simone Biles of word gymnastics at this point, that's how she got to be the Black vice president, right? So to not employ that was a choice. I feel like that was a choice to agree with him. That was some type of, I don't know. I don't want to assume, but I've seen all episodes of House of Cards. And that just felt like some pandering shit and some shit that they got going on within the politics of the biz. And then you got Clyburn saying the same shit. And I want to believe that it's some spook who sat by the door shit, but the Democrats just simply have not indicated that to us at any time. Like we keep thinking like, oh, maybe they're doing this so that they can do this. And then they never do the this. Right? They never do that other part. It's they like, don't. Oh, that was just, so y'all was just going to do that, huh? Like I dated a nigga like that who only got through he only thought things 70% through. And I was just like, you forgot this whole integral 30%.
The 30% is important.
It's you gotta follow through. Like it's like somebody eating you out and then stopping right before you're about to nut. And you're just like, what was the point of this? This has been a waste of everyone's time. I told Issa, if she doesn't end up with Lawrence at the end of the show, it's wasted everyone's time. I don't know how it ends, but I've already put in my vote. And so that's what I felt like with Kamala. It's like you're wasting everyone's time because you are being a part of this paradigm of politics that has not helped anybody. And let me be clear, I've never been like a rah-rah shish boom bah for Kamala. I was a rah-rah shish boom bah for getting Trump out of office and seeing what Biden and Kamala are going to do and holding them accountable for that. And I have been a rah-rah shish boom bah for us having a Black vice president. And at a certain point in time, there were a number of Black women in the running for that. It was Kamala, it was Karen Bass, it was Fudge. You know, there were a number of women that were up there. So, but ultimately, I will say, we have to be able to hold our politicians and the people that we put in elected office accountable. And we have to be able to speak honestly about that. And Jemele can say more than any of us, like what happens when you do that, right? And the ways in which that can be deleterious. But ultimately, it's the whole point of this America shit, is being able to do that. And Kamala really hurt my fucking feelings as a Black person, because I felt gaslit when she said that. And I think that as a Black woman herself, you know, I don't like when people are like, oh, well, you know, she ain't Black anyway, so why is she so what did you expect her to say? And it's like, well, we've seen full ass niggas in these positions saying fuck shit. So it ain't about that. Like, you can be a whole ass Negro and still be a Sambo. Like, that's not one, you know, the two are not mutually exclusive. And I'm not saying that that's what she is, but what I am saying is that we are no longer in an era or a time, in my opinion, where we can excuse our politicians' deference from the reality of our existence as politics, which I think a lot of people want to do. They're just like, well, they're politicians, so this is part of the job. And I'm like, it shouldn't be, though.
It very much felt like an answer you give when you have an eye on the presidency. Because I have a feeling she was thinking about what the headline would be had she really answered that question. Like, the reason she stammered through it, because I don't even think she believed what she said. Like, there's no way she did. I was like, you know, if you were
like the only Black woman senator, like, what are we talking about?
Like, clearly, I'm like, how can it not be? You know, and as I've told many people, if America isn't racist, please give me the date and time when it stopped. If you can give me that, I will cop to the fact it is not a racist country. If you can give me the date, I'm good, right? But they can't give you the date.
I just didn't think she had to say it. So that was what blew me. Like, I can come up with a myriad of ways to answer that question without agreeing with this man.
Right. Because you don't want to be on the same side of Tim Scott, but that's a conversation for another day. All right, so this question got a lot of votes. Not sure who it's from because they didn't leave a name. They said, I always see you speak on literally everything happening in our community, and I 100% appreciate it. How do you protect your mental space? How do you not let this overwhelm you?
I really love my dude, and he really loves me. And I think that we kind of, as independent women, it's like, you sometimes feel like you can't say that or else you look like you a simp or some shit. Like, you know, but being in a healthy relationship, if that's something you desire, it can be very helpful in managing that. And as somebody who's been in a lot of unhealthy relationships, like, a healthy relationship and a solid home base can really make a lot of that other shit not stick as hard. So there's that. I log off. You know, like, I'll just take days where I'm just like, not today, devil. I have boundaries. Like, don't take this the wrong way, but sometimes people come in my DMs and they're sharing with me something that's going on with them that I know that I can't fix. Mm-hmm. And I have to not receive that, because I can't take that on, and then I can't take on the guilt of not being able to fix it. So I have to just kind of move through that. I also play a lot of Candy Crush.
Hey, Bejeweled is mine, so I
you know what I mean? Like, I play a lot of Candy Crush, and I've just started I've become much better at giving myself like genuine downtime to just watch a different world, do like art, like like that's why I started my clothing line Illustriously, because it was nice to just be doing something that isn't by nature like me speaking, and it allowed me to again flex my creative hand and just enter a different space. And those things really make a difference, because you're right, it is overwhelming. It's just a lot.
That question was from, I think, Jemele Lee. I hope that's the way you pronounce it. And apologies if you don't. And shout out to the person in here from South Africa. I think it's Chandra Lee. I think that's what it is. So shout out to you, Chandra, for being in here.
Shout out to you,
yes, and South Africa, love that country.
I haven't been yet.
Yeah, I got to spend during the World Cup. I got to spend about 35 days there. It's amazing. Yeah, so it's like, love South Africa. So I would go back there in a heartbeat. But we have to wrap things up. So I'm going to add this this last final question here. And I hate the fact that I am asking you to solve a problem after you said that you can't fix it. But it is what it is, Amanda. You shouldn't be so wise. Otherwise, people wouldn't ask you this. This is from, I think it's Tara Paul. Taray. Sorry if I pronounced it wrong. She or he asked, I'm not sure the gender. I know that you attended Columbia University for your master's and did a podcast on the side effects of being a workaholic. What advice would you give to undergraduate Black college women who attend predominantly white institutions on how to protect their peace and not be workaholics?
I think, well, one, I will say you guys have something we didn't have, which was like access to the internet in a real way. Like at my time in school, like the internet was some shit that you were using for research or for illegally downloading music. Like otherwise, you weren't really like on, chats or, that wasn't kind of like what we were doing. So I think that that's part of it too, right? Is like finding safe spaces on these internets that you can't find. That's the beauty of there being like this whole virtual world that we have now. It's kind of like you have this whole other world that may have resources that you don't have in your real world at that real time. So I think that's part of it. Again, a lot of it just has to do with boundaries. And I think for what it's worth, college is a weird time because I can tell you what to do, but you also kind of just got to learn it. And the beauty of college is that you are getting a chance to learn it without having to also pay bills in the same way.
That's real.
Because when you learning and paying the bills at the same time, it's like, wow, this is a lot. So I think the biggest thing I can say is, hello, hi. Is doing your best to not, one, let the work be your safe space, because that's how you become a workaholic, by the way. When the work becomes your safe space, it becomes you're a workaholic because you're now using work to manage your anxiety. So that's what being a workaholic is. And that's not the same as creativity being an outlet. It's not the same thing.
And suddenly I feel attacked, so thank you.
Namaste.
So attacked.
I'm telling you, like it can be dangerous because you walk a line. Like I know that creativity has been something that helps me get out of a rut, that helps me get out of a low, right? But it can't be this place that you escape to. Stop humping my leg. It can't be this place that you escape to avoid dealing with something else. It has to, like, your work has to be a liberation. And that's like a thing. So there's that. And then there's also just like finding your tribe. And I think a lot of us, we feel like we have to have some big ass tribe, and it might just be 2 people. If you're in a private white institution, like it might just be 2 people, and one of them might be white. Like, you know, but I think we just feel like we got to have this like expanse of folks. And I didn't even go to a private white institution, but I just have always been a big personality, and that like fucked with people. And so like I had to kind of find my way at school in a way that was comfortable for me. And that was a bit uncomfortable for a little bit, you know, like, and I mean, my first day of my sophomore year, when I got to my suite, they had ripped my name off the door and threw it on the ground. And I was like, well, this is trash. And then like 3 weeks later, I was like, can we just all have like a night where we sit and, you know, drink together, and you all can all tell me why you don't like me.
Oh, wow.
And I had 7 motherfuckers sit and take shots of tequila and tell me what they don't like about me. And not one of them has something legitimate to say, because I ain't never done shit to not one of them peppers. And that was the whole point, because I knew that was the case. And that was the whole point. Like, once we do this, you all will reveal to yourselves how fucking whack you sound. But college is like you learning how to deal with you in the midst of dealing with people that are not dealing with themselves. And that's just going to be cumbersome no matter what. I don't have like a skeleton key that's going to ease your journey in that. I really don't. It's because it's just the time in your life where shit is fucking weird, dog. You're like, I'm young, but I'm not a kid. And like, I'm not an adult yet, but I'm like, I like know things, but I know that I'm not like grown. Like, it's a lot. You're like, I'm voting, but I can't rent a car. Like, I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah. Which is why it should be a great period of frankly, self-discovery. So it's like, yeah, enjoy the mistakes. You don't get to,
that's it.
You don't get to make them like you get to make them, you know, in college. So you should enjoy the fact that you get to make them in a weird way.
There's free condoms available, you know, like just, it's college is a time. I didn't go to college during this like social media time, but what made college valuable for me was that it was the first time that I was forced to have to curate my life in like a real way in order to make it worthwhile. And because, you know, a lot of us go to college and we just kind of are there for somebody else. There for our parents or for our family or, you know, for society. Like, you know, we end up with these majors that we don't give a fuck about. And I had to I got pushed up against the wall in a scenario where I had to then decide, am I going to stay here? And if I do stay here, how am I going to stay here and in what way? And I ended up creating my own major. But I'm very like, just a huge advocate for students making their education their education. And knowing that, listen, your advisors have a lot of students to care about. You only have you to care about. So ultimately, when you have talks with your advisors, it should be a conversation versus just a guidance.
That's cool when you talk to your advisor. I don't think I ever talked to one in 4 years at Michigan State. I was like, I don't think I ever talked to one. So, all right.
Well, I had an advisor who like was just like whatever. But I say that because I had a friend who ended up having to do an extra year of school because her advisor misadvised her.
Ooh.
So, and I had a homeboy who ended up leaving school because he was at Prairie View and his advisor misadvised him to a point where he was like, I gotta leave, you know? And so that I know a lot of students who like just put so much into like, this advisor is going to tell me exactly what I need to do and I'm just going to do it. And I was like, I'm going to learn this motherfucking book, this manual, this registration shit. I'm about to know this school backwards and forwards. And I had an advisor tell me like, oh, you need, and sir. And because of that, I was able to get what I needed. Like I know we're running over, but I'll just say this last little bit. Like I was supposed to have to take another class in order to graduate on time. And my advisor had not told me that. I, through my research, was like, holla, I can't, if I don't take this Spanish, if I have to take Spanish, I'm not going to graduate on time. And so I then went to like the head advisor, Rich Nassisi, I always say his name, and was like, I really want to graduate on time. How can I graduate on time? And I just appreciate him and the people like him so much, because he understood that in his role as an administrator at this college, that he had students' individual lives in his hand. And he made an individual decision about me that affected my life, instead of making a generalized decision that wouldn't even have affected his job, right? He could have literally just said like, well, it's not our policy, call it a day. But that would have made me have a year, that would have like held me over. I got to pay more money, et cetera. And it would have done nothing for his job. But what he did do was he was like, well, your major is African American Studies with a concentration in the visual and performing arts. Like Spanish is not like a essential for that. And he was like, well, let's look at your transcripts in high school. And I had gotten an A in every quarter of Spanish in high school. And he was like, I'm not going to make you take Spanish. Like, if it's going to like prevent you from graduating on time and you have to do all this other shit, like I'm just, because I had made up my own curriculum. And I'm just forever thankful for people who do that, for people who use their power to really influence in a real way and understand that like we're all humans and we have individual experiences. And the executives in Hollywood that I really fuck with, that's how they operate. You know, I had to leave I had to leave ICM as an agency. Like I've had to leave those kinds of places because it was absolutely clear that they were always operating from protecting a corporation versus preserving individuals. And it's like, they will throw you to the wolves in 2.2 seconds. So small doses, you know, I tried my best in that book to like share tools that I've learned to get through all of these spaces in time, and share experiences that I've had that people can relate to. Because I think a lot of the frustration that people have is feeling alone in their experience. And sometimes it's not even that you need advice. You just need someone to tell you like, me too, girl, which is, you know, what, which was what the Me Too movement at its original core was about. Like being able to say, I too have experienced this. You are not alone in this. And that frees people from the solitude, you know, of feeling like, if I'm the only one who's going through this, so how can I get through this? When you see other people who have gone through it and they get to the other side, it does give you some power. But I want to just encourage anyone who hasn't read it or who hasn't bought the Audible, to know that, like, again, I'm not coming from anything in that book as an expert. I'm coming from it from a place of really just wanting to take a comedic and insightful look at how we live for the effort of living better.
Well, I mean, I think your master plan of planting those seeds, because it's just a book full of seeds that I certainly felt fed by. I guess it was more than seeds. I guess it was actually fruit that came to bear. And you're right. There is something that is beautiful in the solidarity. And that book was a long awaited trip of solidarity. I could be like, girl, me too. I done prayed for me too. That was me. Woo! I'd have been there.
Yep, I did that.
Right there.
My that opens to this page, so I should have broken up with you. And I know people have people like, yep.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
Well, listen, for all those out there, thank you for participating in this chat. 200 strong, about up in here, 197 just shy. And thank you for all your questions. You can get small doses available through Uncle Bobbie's. Follow Amanda on Instagram and just follow her sparkling career as she does a little bit of everything. And she is that truth teller that we need in a time where people, boy, they tell these lies so regularly, they swear it's the truth. So we need somebody to make sense of this absolute fuckery. So on these days where I think that these stupid people have won, I can remedy that by going to Amanda's page. And it would make me feel so much better. Like, oh, there's at least
The
somebody
feeling is mutual. The feeling is mutual. Go to your page, and it will say, "Do you want to see a dead body?" And I'm
you
like,
know what I'm saying? I'm like, because these people, you know, not today, not the one. Ain't that right? Anyway, thank you, Amanda. And at least per the run of show, I think somebody from Uncle Bobbie's will be appearing in a moment to give a formal goodbye. But I've enjoyed it. There you go.
Thank you, Jemele, so much. And thank you all for joining us and for continuing to uplift both Jemele and I in our authenticity and honesty and creating space. And thank you, Uncle Bobbie's, for creating space for conversations like this and for, you know, really like highlighting Black intellectualism as a necessity for our liberation.
And thank you, Jordan. Shout out to Jordan.
And thank you, Jordan.
So thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks to our audience for bringing it. Thank you, Jemele, for the wonderful, wonderful work in your interview. Thank you, Amanda, for everything. We wish you continued success, both of y'all. Thanks for keeping it real. And audience out there, please stay tuned. Or we've got so many great events coming up, virtual, because we keep it safe. Thank you. And everyone have a good night.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.